Isn't that a beautiful butterfly? Isn't it? Does anyone know what type of butterfly it is? A colourful butterfly, yeah, which probably describes a lot of butterflies, doesn't it? I think the greatest difference between a moth and a butterfly is the amount of colour, isn't it? I mean, I think there's some fantastic-looking moths, but butterflies are very colourful. It's a monarch butterfly, and it's native to North America. And if you look at it sort of with the designer's eye, you can see some really special things. See how the integration of two different shades of the same colour? See how the interdispersing of white along the edges to break the harshness of the black markings? You can actually see that even sometimes on motor cars. You see down the bottom of the windscreen, there's all these little black dots to break the transition from the body of the car to the window of the windscreen. See these veins which supply the structural support, and not only they supply the structural support, but they actually look good, don't they? You know, it's a triumph of creation. Well, these butterflies are native to North America. There's another one there. They live on a special plant in North America, and this is a butterfly eating the plant. And one of the features of these butterflies is that they congregate together in groups. They're, how can I say it? You don't often, for example, see a whole lot of moths unless they're all eating your flower. But this particular species of butterfly likes to congregate. And here's another one. You can see there's a mass profusion of monarch butterflies. Okay, so they're native to North America, the North American continent. And what they found when they studied these butterflies was that they actually originate in Mexico, right? So they originate down here. And what they do is they leave Mexico, they migrate north on various migration paths, and the butterfly will die. And then its children, one of a better word, butterflyettes, will then continue flying north, and they will die. And they'll continue flying north, and they will die. And after about 3 or 4 generations, the butterflies end up in Canada, okay? And then what happens is that what's born is a super butterfly. It looks exactly the same as the other butterflies, but it's bigger and it's also sterile. And then these super butterflies begin the journey back. And they don't die, they fly all the way back from whence they came. So they come, so if this butterfly, the 4 generations ago, originated in this part of Mexico, it will return exactly to the same spot. And you can tell that now because of our genetic knowledge. We can know exactly the link between the butterflies that leave Mexico and the butterflies that return. So the butterfly, the 4th generation or 5th generation of butterfly will return to exactly the same spot that its predecessor left from in Mexico. Isn't that amazing? And there's no model of evolutionary theory that would permit this to occur. And sometimes it's the 3rd generation, sometimes it's the 4th generation, depending on the progress north, how long it took the butterfly to get up there, how many times the cycle of life and death occurred. And what they did, they got a lot of these butterflies coming down through the centre of the United States. They captured them. And what they did is they took them over to California, over here, and they let them go. And when they let them go, the butterflies that would normally end up here ended up there. So even though they were released in California, they flew back down to where their predecessors originally came from. So they got, and there's, it's a very difficult thing to understand how you got this incredibly powerful homing system, just going back. See this fella here. Apparently what they reckon is that there's a brain on the end of that antea. There's a brain there that works determining direction in addition to the one in the body of the creature. So it's quite miraculous. And you can see that there's different migratory patterns of butterflies. Some actually end up in England, so they're quite powerful butterflies in the sense that in a storm they can be blown into Europe. They captured a whole lot and they released them in Australia. I don't know whether they've gone into a migratory cycle in Australia, but this was in about the 1880s. They released a whole lot. So you can see them in your garden from time to time. But they're native to North America. But the final interesting thing is that the butterflies return down to Mexico. They live in Mexico. They don't breed in Mexico. They don't reproduce in Mexico. But after a period of time, the migration starts. So they begin to go back north. And as they go back north, within a short period of time, a couple of weeks, they die and reproduce. They will not do it in Mexico. It might be because they're frightened they'll end up like in a tequila bottle or something like that. And they're smart enough to know that that's a stupid thing. So, but it's incredible that the super butterflies, while they remain infertile, all the way from Canada down to Mexico, as soon as they go back over the border into America, it's just coincidence that it's a border, they become fertile again and reproduce. Isn't that a marvellous thing? And there's absolutely no theory of evolution that can explain this, isn't it? Okay. So now, go on. I want to deal with Thomas, whose name is Didymus, also because that means twin. And Thomas, I think, actually gets a fairly poor press, but let's go on. And you can see here, this is the occasion, noting in Matthew chapter 10, where he calls his disciples and he names them. So you've got Peter, Andrew, his brother, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. So that's the two sons of thunder, as the Messiah called them. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew. So you can see buried in amongst them is Thomas. So he's one of the original disciples, okay? And you can see they went out with instructions to heal, to sick, to raise the dead even, to cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely as you have given, freely you shall receive. So you can see that they were given very broad powers, these disciples, very extensive. And the instruction was not to get any gold or silver or copper. Don't take anything, not even an extra shirt or sandals. I mean, even if we go to Melbourne, we sort of pack a bag, don't we, of all the extra stuff we might need in Melbourne, you know. So you can see that this was this very stripped down form of missionary work. And you can see the injunction there that if you're greeted, bless the household. And if you're not greeted, what you do is you take off your you take off your shoes and knock the dust off your shoes. And that's to say that you are so far apart from me that I'm not even going to take the dust that comes from your town with me. I'm going to be completely free of you, okay? So this is the injunction, and you can see that that's the way the disciples started out. And then the next Thomas is only mentioned, I think, about 4 times in the Bible. So you can see this is the time of the death of Lazarus. So Lazarus has died. And he stayed there for 2 more days. And when he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back. So the statement was, you're mad. If you go back there, they're out, there's a warrant out for your arrest, effectively. Not only are you going to be arrested, but they're going to kill you. Okay, and it's going to be quick and it's going to be short. And Jesus answered there, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daylight will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. But when a person walks in the night, they stumble, for they have no light. So basically he's saying, I'm going to do it in the daylight. They're not going to touch me if I'm in the daylight and I'm walking in the way. And he said to this, and he describes what he says to them, that Lazarus has fallen asleep, and I'm going to wake him up. His disciples replied, if he sleeps, he'll get better. So these guys are very down to earth, aren't they? If Lazarus is asleep, he'll get better. Jesus was speaking of his death. So they told him plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I'm glad I'm not there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him. And this is where Thomas comes out. And this is actually quite a profound statement, because Thomas says, the rest of the disciples, let us also go, so that we may die with him. So you can see that Thomas was very devout. He doesn't have much direct impact on what occurs compared with, say, people like Peter and John and all the rest. But you can see that he's incredibly devoted. He's devoted to the point where he's prepared to die for his Messiah. And then you get the final one, John, if you believe, in my house there are many mansions. You know this by heart, don't you? I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, that I'll come again and receive me unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And if you don't know it, just go home this afternoon and learn it, okay? Right? It's a great promise. Thomas said to him, and this is, I think Thomas was incredibly practical. So having this remark, Thomas' response is, this is what you miss out on. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, and so immediately that leads to this other great statement, isn't it, of Jesus? That I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. For now on you know him and have seen him by seeing me. And Philip said, Lord, show us the Father that will be enough for us. Jesus said, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I've been amongst you for so long a time, anyone who's seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak in my own authority. It's rather the Father that is living in me. So you get this link. And now, we get sort of tied up with this concept of Trinity and monotheism, where how can we be a monotheistic religion when in actual fact there's three forms of the Godhead. The early church didn't have that problem. They were quite comfortable with the fact that Jesus was the Son of God. They didn't have any problems whatsoever. That fitted into their theology without any difficulties. And so the statement that if you believe in me, you believe in what I'm doing, as the Father glorifies the Son. And then, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not, this is the second last episode. Thomas, at this stage, this is following the crucifixion. Thomas was not with the disciples, and as Jean tells us the story, that they told him, we'd seen the Lord. And he says, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Now, what you don't probably realise is that Thomas is certain that I don't want to see something that looks like Jesus. I don't want to see an apparition. I want to be complete. Not only do I want to see a being that looks like Jesus, but I want to be satisfied that physically it is truly Jesus. You understand? That's why he has this specification. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were. Right? Okay? And that's a pretty, as I can say, a very skeptical statement. It's the man who was prepared to die with Jesus is now saying, I don't believe Jesus is resurrected unless you can prove it to me absolutely. So there's two types of faith, as Jean said. There's those who see evidence such as the fulfillment of prophecy and believe, and those who believe without evidence, just in the merit and virtue of the Father and the Messiah. Which one is a better type of faith? Isn't it really? And you can clearly say that Thomas is a type 1 believer, isn't he? And I think sometimes why we as a church and as a religion wind ourselves down so deeply into prophecy reflects our type 1 belief. We want evidence to base our faith on. A type 2 believer doesn't seek that, but I think one of the focuses of, interpreting the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, all the other prophecies, is to satisfy, and we've all got it in us, our desire to have a type 1 belief. Okay. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood amongst them. So you imagine it, like they're totally locked in. They would have been probably locked in out of fear because they were his disciples. If they kill the leader, it's inevitable that they'll come and find the people who are with them and hunt them down. When the gunpowder plot, once they captured the leaders of the gunpowder plot, Guy Fawkes and that, they still went and hunted for all the other associates. They still wanted to get everybody that was possibly involved. And these guys were obviously fearful. And said to them, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. So you can see that there's a miracle here because he goes through the door. But the other miracle is he knows exactly what Thomas specified. Thomas doesn't ask him for permission. You can see the generosity. He doesn't even expect Thomas to ask him for permission. He satisfies Thomas's doubt without even being asked to do so. And the final one, Thomas said, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are us who have not seen him and yet believe. Isn't that the truth? Okay. There's a special blessing on you guys. Okay. Take that blessing. And the final episode, afterwards Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. There was Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee. The sons of Zebedee are who? John and James, right? That's the author of this book, the sons of Zebedee. And two other disciples were together. Now, at the time John wrote this, he probably forgot who the other two were because he's talking about an event which happened about 50 years before he wrote his gospel, and probably their names have dropped off from his recollection. But and the important thing to note here is that you generally rank people in life according to their importance. Like if you see a record of a sporting match, the people who made the greatest contribution to success are named first, right? If you see politicians, the most eminent politicians are named first. You see, so what the interesting thing here is that Thomas is at number 2 spot. Okay? Thomas has risen. And if you look at this, the Gospel of John has many layers. And this is a story about going fishing, right? If you go back to when the disciples were called, you can see a massive parallel because in this one they caught nothing. When Jesus was walking along when he called them, had they caught anything? They'd caught nothing, okay? You can see early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, which is what happened last time when they were called. And he said, friends, have you got any fish? Right? Yeah, literally as children, not any fish you have? Right? That's the literal Greek. But you can see that he inquires of them, like at the time they were called. No, they answered. He said, throw your nets on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul it in. What happened when they were called? He told them to throw their nets on what? The other side. And what did they do? They caught a massive load of fish. And this is the last book in John's Gospel. John doesn't deal with the ascension or anything, but what he does in his Gospel, he starts with the calling, which is expounded in more detail in Luke. And the end is the second, basically the mission that follows the calling. It begins as it ends. You know, after he deals with the identity of Jesus, he goes into the calling, right? And this is now, I guess, what Jesus' second calling. The first calling was to be his disciples. This is the calling to be a missionary. Then the disciple who loved Jesus, John, and that's John. See, he calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved. It's not a statement that is any better than any of the other disciples. It's a statement that he is overwhelmed with the fact that Jesus loved him. Okay? And his badge of honour is the fact that Jesus loved him. Our badge of honour is what? The fact that Jesus loves us. Okay? And that's how he would describe himself. The disciple. You are the person who Jesus loved. Always remember that. Never forget that, okay? I am a person who Jesus loved. Said to Peter, it is the Lord. And as soon as Peter heard him say that it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. So he put his clothes on and jumped into the water. You know? And I think that's the lovable thing about Peter. Sometimes his impulsive behaviour can get him into trouble. But likewise, there is this enthusiasm, you know, that it's from he operates from how he feels. He doesn't think it through. It's how he feels and how he operates. The other disciples followed, towing the net full of fish. They saw a fire burning with fish and some bread. So Jesus had already started cooking their breakfast, okay? And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have caught. So Simon climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of 153 fish. I don't know what 153, whether that has also some overlaying symbolism, I don't know. I've tried to find it, I can't see it. None of the disciples dare ask him, who are you? You see, you can imagine that there's this man. He's called them, who's cooking for them. And none of them say, are you Jesus or anything? They know that they might get chopped up if they do, okay? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came back, took the bread and gave it to them, and same with the fish. So the question is, what happened to Thomas after all of this? Okay, now, some of what I'm telling you is conjecture, but because I've thought about it, it must be right. Okay, you just got to accept that. So what happens here is that Palestine is up here, okay, that spot there. Now, there was a trade route that they discovered which went down through the Red Sea, out into the Gulf of Arabia and across to India. And what they discovered was because of trade winds that, because in those days their boats didn't go to windward very well. You know, it's very difficult to sail a boat to windward, and the technology to do so to do it well is fairly recent, okay? But so what they would do is the trade winds would blow east and west across here. So they'd load their boat up with all the goods. When the wind was behind them, they'd head out and they'd land in India. When the wind turned around direction, they would return back up there. So you had this almost migratory trading system with India. And I mean, Christopher Columbus basically set out to find from Spain a shorter way to India. That's the whole thing. And that's why he called the people in North America Indians, because he thought he'd arrived in India, okay? Anyhow, so this trade, and what I conjecture is that Thomas came down and got on a trade boat, because where he ends up is here, right at the bottom of India, okay? And it'd be unusual if he was, the other conjecture is he walked down into India, but that would be unusual, I think, because if you had walked, you would have stopped a lot higher up. You didn't need to go right down to the very bottom, okay? So that's my theory. Anyway, here's Kerala is, this is a province of India that is so populated that I think it has 1.5 times the number of people that Australia has in it. You know, like it's, and the annual rainfall is 200 inches a year. So it's a wet province, right? And what historically is that these are settlements that Thomas established in India, okay? Thomas, you imagine sort of jumping on a boat, obviously guided by the Spirit, heading off into the wide blue yonder, landing in a city, a civilization, where you basically couldn't speak the language to anybody. You had no way of gaining that knowledge. You know, it's an incredible, and yet he arrived there. He obviously learnt the language and began his missionary. And this, I think, is about the time that, I don't know if that's the time that he arrived or that was the result of his mission work up until that time. Now, remember that this is before Paul's third missionary journey. This is about the time of Paul's second missionary journey. So you can see that it's quite a significant step of evangelism. And also, it's just as big. He travelled just as further. He travelled further than Paul, but the area of his his missionary work was far larger than what Paul did, okay? So, and you can see throughout India, there's symbols and remnants of the church that Thomas established in India, okay? And what I've done, there's stacks on the internet. It is a highly ornate form of church and worship, but that's what you would expect Indians to do. You know, that's a cultural thing, okay? It's certainly not the reductive Scandinavian sort of approach that we've inherited. And you can see here is a statue erected to Thomas. And the interesting thing is to note that the garb that he's wearing is a Western garb. It represents how he would have looked at the time he arrived in India. Okay? And so the effect of all of this is that most of India became Christian. Okay? Marco Polo, who went in 1295, which is at the very end of the Crusades. So the last crusade was in about 1290. This is Marco Polo travelling through Asia at that time, noted that there were numerous churches and congregations in India and elsewhere. They were called Nestorian or Armenians. So you can see that his missionary work was incredibly successful. Okay, and so this idea that India has resisted the gospel is historically totally wrong. what happened when Marco Polo goes through, he noted that India was divided into 6 main kingdoms. 3 of those kingdoms were Christian. 3 were Hindu, okay? But to overcome this, what they had to do, the Brahmins and the Hindus had to stop it. They had to come up with some sort of system to challenge what Thomas had done and the effect of the gospel in Christ. So what they did, they came up with a god Krishna, okay? Now, Krishna sounds very close to Christ, doesn't it? Okay? They copied the name. They will tell you that that's wrong. They will tell you that Krishna lived over 1,000 years before Christ, and it's in fact you Christians have copied the name of Krishna. Okay? That's what they'll tell you. It's totally false. Okay? They gave him a name similar to Christ. They described Krishna as having entered the human body like Christ. Okay? They arranged his birth date centuries before Christ to assert that Christ copied him. See? Okay? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Every Hindu deity has a star sign as part of their occultic heritage. So every deity has, and what that means is that there is a map drawn of what the heavens looked like at the time that deity was born, the time that deity was created. And there's a chap called John Bentley who in 1825, he was skilled. Now, what you've got to remember is that from the time of Kepler, Newton, Copernicus and all of that, they created an accurate model of the movement of heavenly bodies. And from that, you could predict things like when the eclipse would occur. You know how sometimes they say, well, in a week's time there's going to be a solar eclipse or an eclipse of the moon or something, right? That's using these mathematical principles. But you can also wind the clock back. You can go back right into the deepest history, because with modern computers and all of the knowledge of the movement of heavenly bodies, you can work out when things occurred. Okay, you can work out, for example, the day of the Passover in 30 AD. You can work out exactly to when the Passover would have occurred by modelling using the parameters which they determine the Passover. So what Bentley did was that the earliest date that could be claimed for the birth of Krishna was August 600 AD. Right, it had been claimed that he'd been born on the 25th of March 600 BC. So what the Indians weren't aware of is that Bentley, by using Newtonian physics and all the rest, could work out exactly when the concept of Krishna was created. So it is in about 600 AD that they come up and create Krishna as a method of challenging Christ and the gospel that Thomas had given seed to. Okay? And I've met people who've told me, Christianity is just a copy of a part of Hinduism. It's an absolute and total lie. Okay? So if you go and look at the internet, you will get the pushback. This is such a fundamental thing that there's a massive Hindu pushback. And one of the things they say is that, look, the instruments these guys use could be out by 7 degrees. Now, if you got a 7-degree error, which is almost a 10% error in the instrument, anything goes. You can model any sort of outcome you like. You can say, well, when they took that reading it was accurate, that one was out by 7, that one was out by 5. You can model down to anything you want to, okay? And what they find is that they can actually put Krishna on the 18th of February, 3102 BC. So, but the point is that when they realised they couldn't be challenged, Bentley called them out. And if you search the internet whenever you want to, you'll see that there's a whole lot of discussion about how Bentley was wrong. But Bentley was totally right. He exposed the fraud, okay? Now, the other thing to remember is that the church in India kept the Sabbath, right? And the big question is, why is it that essentially the church in India died out? Why is it that the Indian church, Christianity is a religion of India, but it's a religion of a very small minority. How is it that it went from 50% to virtually nothing? And I think this is where the lesson is for us. Because what happened was the Indians had the caste system, right? And that represented stratification by sect, location, and castes of the priestess. It exists beyond Hinduism. So the caste system is systemic in the whole of Indian society. And it is a horrendous system. If you read an Indian novel, the thing that you confronted up front is this caste system. Like, we're Brahmins, we can do that. They're only those, they can do that. And it's so systemic that when I was visiting Bali, the guide said to us, I'm of a high caste, so when I meet someone, I can say, "Good day, mate," or "How are you, sir?" If he's of the lowest class, he's got to address me. He must address me as, "How are you, sir?" He can't say, "Good day, mate," right? Because he's lower. So even every day when they greet each other, they reinforce this insidious Hindu belief as to caste system. And the caste system is based on this idea of reincarnation, where you work your way to a better person, to a better person, to a better person, to a better person, until you can eventually enter heaven. It's inherent in their belief system as to salvation by works through good behaviour, okay, by merit. And so what happened? Caste distinctions amongst Indian Christians are breaking down at the same rate as those amongst Indians belonging to other religions. There exists evidence to show that Christian individuals have mobility within their respective castes, but in some cases, social inertia caused from their old traditions and bias against caste remains, causing caste system to persist amongst Indian Christians. And the name that they gave themselves in the 1930s was the Dalits, the lowest class, the Untouchables. And it's a horrendous name because the name, you're an untouchable. That means you are so bad that I can't even touch you. I'm defiled if I touch you. What a horrible system. What a horrible form of religion. And they've actually found that there's one below the Dalits, another class, which the British never discovered. These people were so closeted, so prohibited from doing anything that the British never came across them. It's a horrendous form of oppression. And so remember, when you think of concepts of paganism, whether it's satanic worship, whether it's Hinduism, whatever it is, Taoism, whatever it is, you will fall into this sort of, we have it and you don't. And you can see, I think sometimes it happens in Christianity, doesn't it, where we're the saved ones and you're not. You get, for example, my nephew's a Jehovah's Witness, and there are a group of people within the Jehovah's Witness who have got special status over and above everyone else. What a horrendous, sinful doctrine, but that's the way it goes. So I won't bore you with reading all of these, but the interesting thing is that the church, these statements indicate quite clearly that the church embraced the caste system. It did not. You can see clearly that the Gospels pronounce that everyone's equal, right? But the church didn't do that in India. Okay? It took on the pagan theories. So some of the Dalits are discriminated against due to the residual leftover practice of caste determination from their previous traditions. This is a tribute to the predominant Hindu society they lived in. Sometimes the only change seen was at their personal religious identity. In many cases, they were still referred to by their Hindu caste names. See, there's names. Dalits is the bottom one. There's other names for the others. I don't care to know what they are. And what happened, this is some point, it was considered, there's occupational discrimination for Christian Dalits, but in some cases they were denied sanitation water. Intercaste marriage amongst Christians is also not commonly practiced. For example, Syrian Christians in Kerala do not marry Dalit Christians. This is a place where Thomas landed. They do not marry other Christians. Sometimes marriages to a higher class Hindu is preferred to marriage to a Dalit Christian. Okay. I was listening once to a radio program by this guy who was communicating with all these Brahmins, and he wasn't a Brahmin. And everything was going fine until he told him he wasn't a Brahmin. Then it was over, okay? It's horrid, absolutely horrid. So it goes on. I won't go any further with that. I'll bore you tearless. But the point that I'm making is that the church didn't speak out. What happened? The church thought, well, look, what we'll do is we'll just pull back some of our doctrines. We'll pull back the sharp bits. We'll give a smooth message. And that way we'll get more converts. That way we will be more successful. And they hid part of the truth. And you can see that happening in the Christian church today. And one of the things is with, the church doesn't speak out about unfair concentrations of wealth. I think there's something like 20 individuals have got more assets than I think the bottom third of the world's population. It's absolutely amazing. Moral standards is fornication and same-sex marriage. Church doesn't speak out about those. Oh yeah, but okay, well, we won't say anything. We won't do it, but we're going to be quiet about that. Sweatshop slavery. And see, remember that moral standards is a statement against homosexuality and lesbianism. Church doesn't speak out about that. I was listening to recently a radio program driving home, and the woman said, look, the Bible essentially is subversive because it's got all of this stuff about homosexuality and all the rest. It's not appropriate for us to have the Bible anymore. We should abolish it. Okay? That's coming, whether you like it or not, that's coming our way. And we sort of feel, the uprise of resurgent Catholicism or something like that will cause that. It's not. The problem is not with that. The problem is with the New Age, amorphous sort of accommodating form of universal religion that embraces everyone and every idea. They're the ones that you've got to fear. And there is a woman in Tasmania who's constantly bringing prosecution complaints against the Archbishop of Tasmania because of discrimination on account of homosexuality. Okay? It's happening now. And we may find that some people we thought weren't our friends are more our friends than what we realise. But the important thing is that there should not be any vilification, but a position should be stated. The church remained silent and the church died. If we remain silent, we are also at the risk of dying. Okay? So don't be frightened. If your message is unpleasant, you've still got to say it. Okay? Thank you very much for your attention.